Welcome everyone, Questini here with a discussion about the Empire in Total War Warhammer 3 Thrones of Decay DLC. What I'm showcasing in this video is going to be available to everyone with the patch 5.0 when Thrones of Decay comes out. So everyone's going to get access to all of this. And there are quite a lot of changes that have been made to the Empire, for the better from my personal perspective. One of the things I want you to notice right off the bat is that I have a bunch of handgunner units in Karl Francis's army. One of the things that Creative Assembly has changed, though maybe not 100% certain on this, but still, one of the things I've personally noticed is that gunpowder units work a lot better than they did before. There were plenty of issues with ranged in general, especially with gunpowder units. They do work better. May require some more testing to be certain on that, but from my personal experience in several campaigns, because I have certainly played quite a few campaigns, range does work better. In sieges, in field battles, you name it, it does work better. Now, talking about the Empire as a whole. Say hello to the brand new Imperial Authority. Good riddance to Imperial Authority. I'm sure we can all agree on that the system was never really all that great. Ever since Creative Assembly introduced it in Warhammer 2. Though it did work kind of better in Warhammer 2 than 3, because in 3, I mean, between Festus, Dryka, Vlad, now the Changeling, it was pretty rough. Hell, even Scrag. So, what does Imperial Authority do? How does it work? Well, all that Imperial Authority does is it represents how much of the Empire is actually under the control of the Empire. So you have various regions that are marked as Empire regions. So if you control all of these regions, you get 100 Imperial Authority. It is a bit of a shame that, say for instance, dwarves controlling the Moot over here doesn't count for that, especially since, I've got good relations with them. Not quite a military alliance, so I might have to break that with them and take over if I want 100% Imperial Authority. And Imperial Authority at the extremes of it gives you growth, control, income, and also increases mercenary replenishment time if you have 100%. At the lowest level, if you're between 0 to 25, you lose a lot of growth, you lose control, you lose 10% income, and you're basically not going to get mercenary. So Electrocount State Troopers, the same ones that we know and love. Those are going to be very hard to acquire. Now, to give you some context with this, when you start a campaign as Karl Franz or Elspeth, because she also has Imperial Authority, everyone has to deal with Imperial Authority if they have territory in the Empire. It only affects territory in the actual Empire. So it's not going to affect, if you're Volkmar, you make your way home and the Empire has collapsed. It's not going to affect the other territory. It's going to affect territory inside the Empire itself. When you start a campaign as Karl Franz or Elspeth, the Imperial Authority is at 66. What does that represent? Well, it represents the vast majority of electric counts controlling all of their territory, with the exception of, Ostermark not controlling Mortime, and of course the Griffin would. The Forest over here, Hockland not controlling the Brass Keep. Obviously Sylvania, which is counted as Imperial territory. And also, given the addition of Elspeth, 3 of these regions over here, including Gelt's former capital, they start under the control of Minor Vampire Counts faction. They're still the Greenskins. They control Fort Sol and Steimgart. Fort Sol, for whatever reason, doesn't count as an Empire region, which is a bit odd, but nor does Helmgar, nor does the fort over here for Marienburg. So you don't necessarily need to control the forts, though they are very strategic locations, so you may want to do so for very clear and obvious reasons. But it's not counting the forts, but you're basically missing Mortime, various territories, and of course, crucially, Sylvania. And you're still at 66. So 66, middle of the road, so you'll start with a bit of growth, a bit of control, and the way I see it in a campaign, you're going to alternate between either decline or prospering Imperial Authority. Getting to the extremes is fairly difficult. You really need to royally screw up in a very major way to get to decline. To get to Nation Crumbled. So you basically have to be AFKing. Or if you're playing a campaign outside of the Empire really needs to have gotten the short end of the stick in terms of faction potential. Now, I should point out something that's going to help you if you're playing a campaign as Karl Franz or any other campaign that of the Empire, is that Elspeth is actually a lot more useful, from what I've seen so far, than Gelt. Because Gelt would take his initial province and then basically AFK for a long time. Now, the reason behind that is not that his AI is passive. The reason behind that is that the AI doesn't like to go for neutral territory to attack a faction. So, because Gelt shared the border with Nuln and he shared the border with Averheim, he would do nothing until basically Averheim or Nuln collapsed. Elspeth starting in Nuln, which shares a direct border with Stirland, which is certainly going to fall under the command of Vlad at one point or another, and is obviously going to be destroyed by Beastmen. It's going to be pressured by the Changeling. That obviously changes the dynamic. So that makes Elspeth far more useful as an ally, or a faction over here, even if I don't necessarily have her as an ally over here. It makes her far more useful and proactive. I mean, like, over here, she took control of all of Sylvania. I mean, I helped her out, defeated some of Vlad's armies, but yeah, she won against Vlad. Something you would almost never see from Gelt, at least not within this particular time frame of a campaign. Other things to point out, many things to point out. Electro Count State Troopers are much cheaper to maintain. Their upkeep has been substantially reduced in a campaign over here. Then you have the Nemesis Crown. So the Nemesis Crown, you get a clue. It's like, oh, it's in a mountainous region, or it's in a region with rivers. That basically meant Stirland to me. And I did manage to find its location. So you go to where the clue is, then you find out where the Nemesis Crown is. I found it over here under a bunch of greenskins, under the control of greenskins, and then I put it in. So it's kind of like the Sword of Cain, but not quite like the Sword of Cain. So for starters, it's not an actual item. It's rather an army effect that you do have on an army. So then the Nemesis Crown gives you diplomatic relations to the Empire, gives you campaign movement range after winning a battle, gives you HP, gives you 2 abilities that can do a good amount of damage, weapon strength and missile strength, but can also increase the upkeep and affect your diplomatic relations in a very negative way with all other factions, including, crucially, Kislev and Dwarves. Not necessarily going to be very, very happy with having the Nemesis Crown. I mean, it kind of looks a bit weird, like when you see the icon over here. Like, it's not really a crown and more like a huge chunk of warpstone. Now, the way you increase its level is you need to fight a certain number of battles, but you can also lose it if you don't fight a certain number of battles. So this army has been passive for many turns. Like, honestly, I'm not necessarily too fond of keeping the Nemesis Crown, if I'm being honest. You can seal it off. It probably will reappear at one point or another. You can get some gold from doing so. I mean, it's useful for, for a lot of power, but at the same time, the effect of diplomatic relations is, let's just say, particularly painful in a campaign. Though there are ways, especially as playing as Karl Franz, to tackle that aspect. Another thing to point out is how Gotrek and Felix work. Now, I don't have Gotrek here. He's bugged in the current version of the game. They are going to fix that. They are aware of it. They're going to fix that, but you can get Felix. The way it works, like, once your Legendary Lord gets to either rank 14 or 15, you get Quest Battle. It takes place here near Altdorf, but it's happening in the realm of Slaanesh. You gotta keep Gotrek and Felix alive. Gotrek does have a tendency of getting himself killed. It does require a pretty powerful army, not because the battle is that difficult. It's not. It's more so because Gotrek does have a tendency to just rush in and get himself killed, and you have to try and keep him alive in that particular situation. And obviously, Gotrek and Felix do apply to every Order campaign. So anyone that can get them, that's how you do get them at the moment. Okay, so Imperial Authority is changed. Another thing to also mention with Imperial Authority is how confederations, military alliances, trade agreements, all that kind of stuff work. So previously, with respect to the Imperial Authority system, you couldn't get the military alliance. You could get the military access pack, but you couldn't get a military alliance, nor could you confederate the faction for diplomacy. If you're playing Karl Franz, you still can't do it for diplomacy. You do have specific ways of doing it. It's not particularly painful to confederate as Karl Franz. It does work. I'll talk about Karl Franz in a separate video, his own unique campaign mechanics. But you do have everything, even as Karl Franz, all the way to military alliances. And this is very important because one of the issues with the previous system is that Imperial factions would not engage diplomacy because they couldn't, right? They had limitations on that. So they wouldn't ally each other, they would not help each other out, which caused a lot of issues for the Empire. Now that's no longer the case. If you're playing any other campaign except Karl Franz, you can confederate normally. Not sure how it is for Elspeth. Haven't played her campaign, haven't played anything with regards to actually DLC. All you're seeing here is going to be available for everyone. You still have the prestige system, you still have fealty, but they do work in very different ways. Okay. Beyond that, research tree. A couple of things have been changed, so you do have various things switched around over here. So for instance, Imperial College's focus is on giving you hero capacity. I imagine this is going to affect the engineers, not just the research rate there, but going to increase their hero capacity and recruit rank. You can get Clergy of Sigmar Imperial University pretty quickly. Well, it does still take 7 turns initially. You also get the Colleges of Magic. You get a bunch of new stuff. And yeah, some things have been changed around. Some things have remained the same. It is improved in a number of ways, though. Very substantial changes in terms of the Empire buildings. The units, largely the same. How you acquire those units and how you acquire heroes, very, very different. So, for the most part, the infrastructure part over here, well, basically everything on this side has largely stayed the same. With some exception, of course, like the coaching in has been changed, so you're no longer recruiting witch hunters from it. You do get an upkeep benefit in a region and recruitment cost in a region. I imagine this is a useful benefit if you're looking to recruit an army in a particular region, because you can do it cheaper, and while you're recruiting, it would be better if it was like province-wide, sure, but hey, it does work. I do think like toll gates have been changed as well, like with that local recruitment duration and global recruitment duration benefit. So, but they still provide an income benefit in your province. The armoring is removed, and the effect has been put in the stables chain. So if you want to increase local recruitment capacity and global recruitment capacity, you can do it through the menagerie. Okay, military buildings have been changed very significantly. So, starting with the barracks, at tier 1, you now get spearmen with shields and swordsmen. Archers and spearmen are still recruited from any building, so they removed them from the barracks because there's no need for it, right? Because if you can have a barracks, you obviously have the main building chain built up. So you get spearmen with shields. That's a good change because, well, they're effectively the same unit. The only difference is one of them, of course, is using a spear. The other one is using a sword, one-handed sword. Tier 2, you get crossbowmen and halberdiers. No more limitations on recruitment. You no longer need an extra building. You can just recruit them right off the bat, and you can get captains recruited at Tier 2. At Tier 3, you still have huntsmen and greatswords. Same situation there, just don't need the blacksmith chain anymore. New building, the gunnery school. At Tier 1, you get pistoliers and free company militia. At Tier 2, you get witch hunters, handgunners, and outriders. And at Tier 3, you get outriders, grenade launchers. So those are far more available than they were before. For advanced military buildings or military support, you can get warrior priests at Tier 2, increased capacity at Tier 3. So you can get all the heroes at Tier 2, at least one, and increase their capacity at Tier 3, with the exception of mages, which still require a Tier 3 settlement. And obviously for Altdorf, you do need to get that landmark, but for other buildings, I mean, even for mages, actually, I'm better on. Like, all heroes can be acquired at Tier 2, and you can increase capacity at Tier 3. Great stuff. Really good stuff over there. So you can get all those wizards. And there is a new wizard as well available for the Empire. We get the Gold Wizard, so Wizards of Metal. Yes, we now have a new school of magic. I really drew the short end of the stick in this Karl Franz campaign, and I got a light wizard at the beginning. Yeah, that was not particularly great. I should mention that what you're seeing here should not be viewed as in any way an optimal campaign. There's a lot of things to relearn as I see it in terms of how to play an Imperial campaign. Because you get a lot more units available early on. You get a lot more heroes available early on. They're easier to get. That obviously changes the dynamic of every Imperial campaign in a very, very substantial way. So Warrior Priests and Flagellants can be recruited at Tier 2, and the Temple of Sigmar only goes up to Tier 3. Makes sense. There was very little value in building a Temple of Sigmar in a provincial capital. You had other things to worry about, especially with the barracks situation, blacksmith situation. In terms of stables, you can now get Imperial Knights at Tier 2. You can get Rice Guard and Knights of the Blazing Sun at Tier 3. And Knights of the Blazing Sun have regular upkeep. You no longer need to control Talabayam in order to reduce their upkeep. I almost never used Knights of the Blazing Sun in a campaign, not because I don't think they're not useful. I mean, they don't have an anti-large bonus, they don't have an anti-infantry bonus, they don't have an armor piercing, so those are issues. But I would still have used them, if not for the fact that, yeah, getting them does require, or getting them in the current patch, in the current life patch, does require getting Talabayam in order to not pay an exorbitant sum. And really, by the time you got the landmark in Talabayam, you really would be getting Demigryphs anyway. So now that obviously has changed, and you have a reason to go for different types of cavalry. Like, I would probably not use Imperial Knights all the same. I would just go for Knights of the Blazing Sun. They still do take 2 turns to recruit, but hey, look at that. You do have ways of reducing recruitment duration in an Imperial campaign. And then finally, the artillery chain. So you get war wagons and mortars at Tier 2, cannons and war wagons with mortars at Tier 3. Hellstorms are still Tier 4, and Hellblaster volley guns are Tier 4 now, and siege tanks are Tier 5. So what this means is that the Empire has siege available much earlier on. One of the problems that the Empire had in terms of its siege is how difficult it was to get any kind of real siege, like except mortars. Now you do have siege available early on in a campaign. You can get cannons. You can get mortars earlier. You can... And you can even get Hellblaster volley guns earlier in a campaign. So this is, from my perspective, all really good. Now, I don't want to necessarily give any firm opinions. There's still a review embargo, but you do have easier access to units. You do have easier access to heroes. You do have a lot more variety in terms of your units. You have bigger reasons to use Electric Count State Troopers because their upkeep is significantly reduced. So yeah, all in all, they have made some fairly major, substantial changes to the Empire over here in a campaign. Except the climate situation, so, you know, Karl Franz still can take mountains or forests and all that, but a lot of changes over here to the Empire. Now, before I end this video, let me talk about Lords and Hero changes for the Empire. Archlectors have gotten a nerf. It used to be that you could get the Grand Soulfire for them very, very easily. But now you need rank 15 for that. Outside of that, they're largely the same. They still have Barded Warhorse. They still have a melee skill line. But yeah, they did get nerfed. And honestly, it was pretty much necessary, I think, because the ability of getting Grand Soulfire very quickly with Archlectors made them incredibly powerful. And if that had stayed the same, even with other changes for the other Lord options and the addition of a new Lord choice, you probably would have been using Archlectors a lot. I mean, you still will. Keep that in mind. You still will be using a lot of Archlectors. For Generals of the Empire, you now have a choice between 2 special skill lines. So you get either Imperial Training or Drill Instructor. Imperial Training gives you various benefits to the Lord himself. So you get things like War Hero, you get things like Heroic Killing Blow, and a good amount of combat power. Drill Instructor gives you Vigor Loss Reduction, Experience Gain in your army, Charge benefits, Campaign Movement range benefits, Recruitment benefits, local recruitment capacity, casualty replenishment for the army, and a leader of men, which reduces upkeep by 5%, gives you a 6 leadership for army. So Arch-Selector, still really good in combat. General of the Empire is better at leading the actual army. What about Huntsman General? They're exactly the same as they were before. Though, with the improvement of range combat, they're obviously going to be more useful than they were before. And then we got to talk about heroes. So not only can you get heroes easier, there's also more value to them. So mages get a new skill line over here that, well, practically buffs their magic, hero action, success chance, more magic benefits, some survival benefits, so armor and speed, and aura of protection, which gives damage resistance and corruption. So yeah, getting a bunch of mages can be, especially with a high rank in an army, can be pretty useful. Might be quite very relevant for Balthazar Guild. Imperial Captains, they get so sparring practice into killing blow. So you get Guardian, you get sparring practice, you get killing blow. So they have more survivability. They increase the survivability of a lord or hero next to them. So physical resistance can match very well with warrior priests. And they then have a choice between a cavalry benefit or an infantry benefit. I probably would be going for a lot of that infantry benefit, but keep in mind, it's not going to buff your range except in terms of upkeep over there for them. Actually, it's going to buff your range in terms of the survivability as well, based on that. Witch Hunters, so they get free choices between Strict Obedience, Way of the Wolf, and Purifying Flames. Strict Obedience gives you physical resistance and Unbreakable, and also you get Templar, which reduces enemy winds of magic, and gives you a Vigor loss reduction against Chaos, Norsca, Demons, and Greenskins. So basically the vast majority of actions that you would be fighting in an Imperial campaign. Where the Wolf gives you an ambush success chance, speed, and stock. And then Shadowy Servant gives you armor, piercing, missile damage, and snipe attribute. So you can hide him and use him to snipe, basically. Put him in a forest, hide him in that forest, and he won't be detected so easily. Purifying Flames gives you a corruption benefit and flaming attacks, and then you get assassinate, enemy hero action, success chance. Like, I think for the most part, Strict Obedience is probably the way you're going to want to go, but there's obviously some benefits with the other ones as well. As for Warrior Priests, they've largely stayed the same. Well, of course, Righteous Fury, Frenzy, Weapon Strength for Flagellants. But yeah, I mean, they've largely stayed the same as they were before. I mean, they didn't need a buff. They didn't get a nerf. They didn't need the buff because they were already, like, Warrior Priest Doom stacks were a thing. Now, however, you have reasons to go with Imperial Captains and Witch Hunters and, of course, more mages as well. And that is all there is to the Empire minus specific campaign things to talk about, like Karl Franz or Guild. Some very substantial things to talk about there as well. Let me know what you guys think about all these changes. What I would personally say on this, without really breaking the review embargo, is that even before Thrones of Decay came out, my perspective was that the success or failure of Thrones of Decay would be determined by what they were going to do for the Empire. They've done a lot for the Empire. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. And stay tuned for more, because we're going to now talk about the little short people that are in the mountains, because they've also gotten some fairly substantial changes in their own right. Stay tuned.